Hi there. Welcome to another presentation for the Sound and Emotions Conference. We now have John St. Clair. Hey, John.
Hey, David. Happy to be here.
Welcome, welcome.
Thanks.
John St. Clair has been a performing musician for over 55 years and has done sound design for theater and feature films and performed hundreds of sound meditations. He has multiple degrees in music and is accomplished in all musical styles. He's taught instrumental music for over 15 years for all stringed instruments. He has studied with many internationally recognized scientists and spiritual teachers and has been trained and certified in a long list of complementary healing modalities. He's completing his master's degree at the California Institute of Human Science doing research on sound and crystals. He teaches classes and workshops on sound healing, crystals, and consciousness, and regularly presents his research at scientific conferences. John has been in a private practice for the last 15 years and has assisted hundreds of clients to overcome obstacles, connect with the essence of their being, and embody a sense of lasting, deep inner peace. As a side effect, they often look 10 years younger, and persistent, uncomfortable physical conditions often change significantly or disappear entirely. What have you
Okay.
been up to?
Well, right now I'm working on a new research project to uh, to better understand the effects of the gong. As you saw in the meditation, I have a 80-inch gong, 84 really, but who's counting? And um, the the study is to examine cortisol levels and immunoglobulin A levels, which are associated with upper respiratory tract immunity, to measure salivary biomarkers for stress and immunity and correlate that with self reported states of change in depression, anxiety, and stress and pain.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's looking good.
So you have some ideas as to why gongs work?
Well,
I've got some thoughts. Are you going to talk about in your presentation? I don't want to steal your thunder here.
yeah, yeah, I have a few ideas, and I'm pretty much this. I just finished writing my master's thesis. This is really a presentation based on that thesis. Now, there's some. I'm just going through it in the last couple of days. They're like, oh, this is too sciencey for some of this crowd. I have to like cut out some things, but or to try and phrase it in a way that everybody can get it, right? And I'm hoping that I'm able to do that today.
Yeah,
So,
cool. When I think of gongs, I think of multiple frequencies, multiple inharmonic frequencies that aren't mathematical multiples, which makes them even more chaotic, and noise. So you got all this multiple things going on that are actually quite chaotic, and that's why it's so good for breaking up stuck energy.
well, I don't really like the word noise.
Well, noise is just it's just an incomplete frequency. Technically, in science, I was a physics major, so when
Yeah.
you look, noise is defined by an incomplete frequency where you don't have an entire waveform. That's the definition. Okay, but otherwise, it's got a bad connotation. But yeah, but that's what is noise is just like white or pink or any one
Yeah.
of the colored. It's chaotic vibrations is really
Right,
all
right.
it is.
Well, actually, um, I'm going to speak to that quite a bit because it's about the gong is a non-linear instrument, and that non-linearity of how it responds is maybe one of the most profound effects that it causes.
Hmm.
Um, Now, there was a study, um, a PhD dissertation at Sophia University just recently, where someone listened. They had a bunch of people listen to a 50-inch gong. Um, well, one of my friends who's a scientist said, "Oh, that's phony baloney, right? Because when you're standing 2 inches from this 80-inch gong, it's moving your clothes and the hairs on your arm and the vibrations are just penetrating right into your cells. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about is how does that work? What does it do?
Cool. Just so you know, what I think your leg is hitting your
Oh,
table, so you're bouncing around a little bit. So cool. Okay. Cool. So tell us about your presentation. What's the overview?
well, it's great to be here at the 11th annual conference. And can you believe it's 11?
I know. I know.
I know. Well, we had more hair back then.
Right, 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 right.
Um,
Different color too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, anyway, I wanted to touch on a few things that have resonated in my practice and that have really pointed towards some profound implications. Meditation is frequently prescribed to reduce stress, and it's been actually shown to reduce cortisol and improve IgA, which is the two things I'm measuring. But people often have difficulty meditating. It's a new thing, and it requires unfamiliar, subjective mental action. Right? You have to quiet your mind. Don't think about anything. Don't have thoughts. Allow your thoughts to flow through. Focus on your breath. Focus on a mantra. Focus on your third eye. Don't do anything. And and so no matter what, when you're meditating, you have to do something. Even if you're meditating, you have to sit to do. But the difference is that the gong does it to you. And regardless of the different forms of meditation, you get the same kind of rejuvenating meditative state achieved without any action required, right? You don't do anything, the gong does it to you.
This is why we love sound healing, is because we're lazy. Right? It's like not only do you have to not do anything, it's like unbelievably feels great and it's beautiful and you're healed. It's like
Yeah,
goodness gracious. Imagine like a doctor saying, "Oh, just take this. You're gonna really love it when you take
yeah,
it." Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't see doctors too often. My brother's a doctor though, but I don't recall any ever really saying that. But
Right.
I do have a little interesting factoid here is that, excuse me, a year-long assessment, let me read it here. A year-long assessment by the U.S. Office of Technology Assessment has found by controlled clinical trials that only 10 to 20% of all procedures used in medical practice have shown to be beneficial. Kind of low.
Uh,
So,
one of our people on our board actually got a printout from the pharmaceutical companies, and it showed what percentage effectiveness for all the different issues,
oh
and
yeah,
average was around 20 to 30% total.
right, right. So my question is, can the non-invasive nature of the gong therapy be utilized to resonate with the innate healing wisdom of the body, using a less traumatic process with a more efficacious outcome? And I have a little quote from Rudolf Steiner who said, "There will come a time when a disease condition will not be described as it is today by physicians and psychologists, but will be spoken of in musical terms as one would speak of a piano that was out of tune." And
Nice.
I knew that was something that you could resonate with.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't wait.
All right. Well, let's see. Share my screen. And here we go. So, gongs and altered states, biophysical mechanisms, and cosmic consciousness. So, about 10 years ago, I stood in front of one of these big gongs and everything changed. It was about 10 minutes. I was somehow transported out into space. And at the end of 10 minutes, I thought I was going to cry and I had no idea why. So, I read every book about gongs, really searched into it. Don Conroe, the Grand Gong Master, says the universe is a gong. And I said, come on, Don. I mean, I know you like gongs, but that might be a little over the top. And he said, well, look, the universe contains every frequency. The gong contains every frequency. Okay, maybe the universe is a gong, but I'm not sure how you're going to prove that. Well, if you stay around to the end, maybe I will find a way to prove that. So let's just see how it goes. So I'm going to talk about the different mechanisms of action that the gong has to produce these altered states. Hearing, right brain activation, resonating with your chakras, tactile stimulation, magnetosonic waves, biomechanical transduction, water information modulation, and baryonic acoustic oscillations. So starting with hearing. Just a little bit about hearing, it's way more sensitive than vision. Your eyes can only see 1 octave of light, but you can hear 12 octaves of sound. And it takes only 28 samples per second for your eyes to suspend disbelief, but it takes 48 samples per second for your ears to suspend disbelief. So here's a little map showing the range of hearing, what we can hear, and the sounds that are produced. Now, the auditory experience in that gray area there encompasses everything, and the gong actually encompasses things outside of the threshold of hearing, down in the lower left-hand corner as well. Even though you can't hear it, you can feel it, and anyway, it's difficult to describe, but you can definitely feel it. So, how does hearing work? There's a couple different theories. I'm just going to talk about 2, well, maybe 3. Here, the sound comes in on the left-hand side of the screen and goes through the ear, hits the eardrum, moves those little bones. That little stirrup-shaped bone goes into the vestibular duct, and that stimulates inside that little coil there. And the basilar membrane has different areas that resonate at different frequencies. And so when, say, 300 hertz comes in, you just have that little arrow in the middle there that represents something like that. It stimulates that part of that membrane that resonates at 300 hertz, and that's how you hear the sound. So this is called the resonance theory of hearing, where sounds from the environment are a spectral representative form extracted by the inner ear. The inner ear serves as a tuned resonator. Oops. How'd that happen? Sorry, the inner ear serves as a tuned resonator that passes the spectral representation to the brainstem and then the auditory cortex via the auditory nerve. So the basilar membrane of the ear resonates with the sound at a corresponding characteristic frequency. So if it's 300 hertz, the membrane has that characteristic frequency and it moves, and that's how you feel it. And that's how you sense it. But characteristic frequencies are difficult to determine below 120 hertz. So you can see in this little graph right here, in between 100 and 200, right around there, all those lines start to drop off, and this theory no longer works. You don't have, your basilar membrane can't resonate with those lower frequencies. And so there's the frequency theory of hearing, that the human nervous system operates in the acoustic range. So individual nerve fibers, including your auditory nerve, can only fire at a range between 300 to 500 times a second. So this is in the acoustic range. And groups of nerves can only fire up to 5,000 cycles per second. So that's very interesting, because the sounds in the overlapping range from 120 to 5,000 are processed by both forms of hearing. So this spectrum of dual processing is right in the primary vocal range. And this may very well account for the intense emotional responses from vocal toning. So humans are pattern recognition machines, and we're always trying to make sense of the world through pattern recognition. Now, when you look at this picture, I'm going to show some visual examples rather than auditory to drive the point home. No one I've ever met has looked at this picture and told me, oh yeah, that's a picture of 8 red circles with 3 intersecting white lines. Everyone tends to see a cube, because we're trying to make sense of the world by recognizing patterns. Here's a linear pattern. It's easy to recognize, somewhat soothing maybe. This is a non-linear pattern. And that non-linear pattern, no matter how long you look at it, you look for a pattern, you look for a pattern, and it kind of moves your eye around and moves your mind around. And so gongs produce nonlinear sounds which don't follow a regular harmonic pattern. And because the gong doesn't follow these patterns, at some point the mind stops looking for a pattern and it just lets go. And I've had a woman that she described herself as being admittedly very stressed. And she stood by the gong for 5 minutes and she said, that was the first time in my life I have never had any thoughts in my mind. And I'll talk more about that in a little while here. So, but there you go. Problem solved. You just needed to restart. So now we'll talk about right brain activation. Kind of goes along with hearing because the tonal quality has been shown to change psychological states because tonal processing over here in the right brain is separate from language processing on the left brain. And so the right brain activity is associated with intuition and nonlinear consciousness. There's that word, nonlinear again. And developing this mental state leads to parasympathetic response and physical healing. So here's a great analogy. It kind of shows the left brain is sort of black and white, right? Yes, no, etc. Where the right brain is a lot more touchy-feely. And now that we're in the right brain, let's talk about chakra resonance as maybe a method that the gong might stimulate. Well, the common belief is that the chakras follow the C major scale from the base to the crown. And the earliest publication introducing this belief was in 1970 by some American and European authors. There's absolutely no evidence for this, and there's no ancient tradition for this. However, there is evidence to the contrary. So we'll just let that fall away, and we'll look at some of the evidence. This is from Thomas Anderson at Physonics, and he did a study to measure people's subjective response to different tones and focusing on their chakras. And the darker the square, the greater the response. So all the way in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the low C tended to have the greatest amount of response. So maybe that has something to do with it. But every other note did also. And what this really shows is that the lower frequencies, all the way on the left-hand side there, tend to stimulate the lower chakras. And if it was C, D, E, F, G, A, B up the chakras, then all of these little squares that are highlighted, you would expect to see them all perfectly dark. And it's not that way at all. So the thing about chakra resonance in the gong, we can't say that all chakras are tuned to the same note, but this study did demonstrate that there is a resonant effect of specific sound frequencies on chakras. It's just not the same for everybody. So the mythology of this being the chakras, well, you get my idea of what I think about that mythology. So let's talk about tactile stimulation. Here, the gong, like I was saying before, you feel it on your skin. You feel the hairs moving on your arms. And, pardon me, so hairs send information to the brain, and there's several different types of hair and different types of information that gets sent to the brain. Well, this is kind of common throughout the animal kingdom of antennas. And there's a story about Native Americans who were expert trackers, and they joined the military in World War II, and they had to cut off all their hair, and their hair was the antenna that helped them to track better. And when they cut it all off, they lost that power. Well, people debate if your hair is really an antenna or not. For the people that are uncertain about that, I encourage them to consider this, because if that doesn't look like an antenna, I don't know what does. And I can't say for sure if long hair is an antenna, but, well, I do have my own ideas about things. So in addition to the hairs, there's also 3 different touch receptor cells, and each of these different touch receptor cells gets tired at a different rate. That's why the acoustic beds, the sound moves around. because the the cells get tired and they stop responding. They habituate to the sound. And so by moving the sound around, the cells never get tired. They get stimulated and rest and get stimulated. And then, excuse me, this creates a parasympathetic response. So tactile stimulation throughout the entire body activates the peripheral nervous system. You get really connected, and combined with headphones and the acoustic stimulations, this can really induce a parasympathetic response. So the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic is sympathetic is fight or flight, parasympathetic is rest and digest. This is when you rest and restore your body through parasympathetic response. So, oops, got a little too far there. What happened? Here we go again. So, magnetosonic waves. This is very interesting. It's really a cosmological effect, but the thing about magnetosonic waves, let me just look at my notes here, is that I just have to ask the question, is can the influence of the gong on the magnetosonic compression and rarefaction of the magnetic field of the heart impact that field and modulate how the field imprints information onto the iron in the hemoglobin of red blood cells? Well, maybe. You see, when impulses impact the abrupt boundary between the heart magnetic field and the surrounding area, ripples travel along the surface of the magnetic field and they get reflected back from the magnetic poles. And the interference of the original reflected waves leads to a standing wave pattern in which certain points can be standing while others vibrate back and forth. And a drum resonates just like this when struck exactly the same way. So in this case, the drum is the magnetic field of the heart. And here it shows kind of what the standing waves look like in that field. And I was going to talk a minute about how we record music, or how we used to record music on magnetic tape, is that all the tape has these random metallic particles. And when it goes through the circuitry, the sound comes in and it's an electrical signal, and that the tape bridges the gap of that circuit, and that electrical signal passes onto the tape, and all the magnetic particles form into a pattern. And that pattern stores the sound when you play it back. It's amazing. But the point of all this is that this is why humans are pattern recognition machines, because patterns is how information is stored. And so that's why I wonder, can the modulations of the heart's magnetic field imprint information on the iron or the red blood cells similar to how information is stored on magnetic tape? I have spoken to some other scientists about this. They think it's a very interesting idea. And if there's any physicists out there listening to this would like to contact me, I'd love to talk to you about it. So now I want to talk about water information modulation and how water stores information. And I know this is a crystal, not water, but I have to diverge for a minute here to talk about crystals so that I can talk more about water. And so I did a study on the different methods of deleting information in crystals. Now you can go online and there's 20 different ways to clear a crystal, but there's absolutely zero evidence for any of those ways. So I studied with Marcel Vogel, who is an IBM scientist who invented liquid crystal displays and magnetic disk storage. And I kind of continued on some of his work here. And what I've done, I took a gas discharge visualization device here and measured before and after storing information in the crystals. And with the device, it passed a voltage through and it made a little movie. And then you specialized software to analyze the area, intensity, and entropy of that light. And the data was graphed and compared, as highly statistically significant. The top line is the natural state. So I recorded this 2 times for each pass. So you see the 2 top lines are in the crystal in its natural state. And the 2 bottom lines right underneath that jaggedy one is after information was stored in the crystal. And when you look at the bottom graph is the same as the top graph. It's just presented in a different way, so you can see the highly statistically significant difference between the 2. So if you want to know how to store information in crystals, send me a note. I'll send you that protocol. But The point was the study demonstrated that information could be stored and erased in quartz crystals. And when it was stored in the crystals, there was a decrease in the intensity, a decrease in the area, and a decrease in the entropy of light. Now, entropy means everything moving towards randomness. So it's actually more organized. So, and this, I think, points to how the information is stored. And my theory is that quartz crystals are hexagonal rings. And my theory is electrons flow around this ring and of the hexagonal atomic lattice, and this creates a magnetic field. And that magnetic field stores information and creates the observed effects, just like the orientation of the magnetic particles on the tape. The orientation of the magnetic fields within the crystal stores the information. Well, this is most likely a reasonable theory since ring currents exist at the atomic, molecular, planetary, stellar, galactic levels. Ring currents scale throughout the entire cosmos. So here's a graphic representation of a couple ring currents. And I have to ask is, could the orientation of the magnetic fields of these currents store information in the same fashion as the magnetic particles on tape? Well, now to the water part, because the structure of quartz crystals and the structure of water is exactly the same. They are hexagonal rings, and all the water in every living cell is structured into hexagonal rings, and this is how life can operate is through that structured water. And the rings stack on top of each other in layers, and one layer, they're not just right on top, they're like if this is a hexagonal ring and this is one, they're not right on top, they're kind of scooched over a little bit so that they form bonds with the rings below. And that's what that tetrahedral shape looks like. And quartz crystals are tetrahedral. That's why you see, let's see if I have one here. Well, here's a little one. Hold it up. This crystal is this shape because that is the shape of the actual atoms at the very smallest level, and it's reflected all the way out. This is what makes it a crystal. So here is a micrograph of water that is structured, and you can see all the hexagons there. And everyone knows snowflakes are always excited because this is the representation at the atomic level being distributed out into the form to create this shape. So now that we're talking about water, let me talk about Luc Montagnier, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the AIDS virus. He later studied the properties of structured water in relationship to DNA. And this is, I think, fascinating and really important because he took a DNA sample and diluted it 10 to 1. In between each dilution, he spun it in a vortex for 15 seconds. And this structures the water. Water is structured by movement, by spinning, by movement, by sound, and by infrared light. That's why infrared saunas are good. So after many dilutions, not even one molecule of the original sample was present. However, he could measure an electromagnetic signal in the water. So he transmitted this signal from his laboratory in Paris to a university in Italy, and then they played that signal into ordinary water for an hour. And Luc refers to this signal as music, which I think that's kind of interesting. It's like DNA as music. And the water shielded from all other frequencies while listening to the music. And in the same way, my entire room, which you saw the video of the meditation, my whole room is shielded from all external EMFs so that this same kind of thing can happen in there. So after the water listened to the music that was recorded in Paris, they add some nucleotides to the water, throw in some polymerase, which is the enzyme that replicates DNA, and then somehow, right, the enzyme receives information from the music that was played into the water and reconstructs the new DNA. Now, there's no DNA in this water at all. it's just water, but it's water that has that original signal. And when that new DNA is compared with the original, it's over 98% accurate. So, wow. What this tells us is that the information is stored in the structured water of our cells, and that informs our DNA. And I believe this is the same as with the crystals. Hexagonal rings of the water, electrons spin around those rings, and that stores information. And many people are familiar with Dr. Emoto's work on storing information in water and getting crystals out of it. So the human body is about 65% water by volume, but by number of molecules, it's 99% water. And so our thoughts and our feelings affect the information that's stored in the water of our cells, and the thoughts and feelings inform our cells. I listened to an interview with some centenarians, and I don't remember what anybody said except for one old woman. She said, negative thoughts are like poison to your body. Well, this would kind of go right along with that. And so, what would it feel like if 99% of the molecules in your body were doing this? Well, it would feel like this. It would be resetting everything. It would be, it would be as if, well, I can tell you it's exactly like coming, how can I describe it? People come stand behind my gong for 10 minutes and they walk out and their face is completely different. They are transformed in just a short period of time. So, and that's just from the water. So now I want to talk about the tensegrity model of connective tissue as information pathways for the biocrystalline superconducting network. All right, there's a lot of $3 words in there. Let's see if I can simplify it. Well, tensegrity was a term coined by Buckminster Fuller that refers to tension and compression. And this is an amazing looking chair. It's called a tensegrity chair. It's based on his model. And here you can see the musculoskeletal system is a tensegrity system. This is how robots are able to walk, because they took this tensegrity idea and they mapped it over into something to make a robot walk. And you can see the compression elements are the bones, and the tension elements are the connective tissue. And so connective tissue connects every bone, muscle, organ, and cell to every other part of the body. And structured water acts as a biocrystalline superconducting pathway for this information to instantaneously be transmitted through the entire body to every part of the body when it's compressed by sound. So a slight compression of sound can transmit information through there. Now, let me just get my notes here a little bit. External perturbations of the tensegrity structure results in a systematic redistribution of tensional forces through the entire structure to maintain structural integrity. So there's some rigorous research that shows that liquid crystalline water aligned with the collagen fibers in the fascia creates a superconducting network of information transmission. And this is most likely the mechanism for acupuncture meridians. And after I finish the research project I'm on now, one of the ones I'm looking at doing is measuring the effect of the gong on acupuncture meridians. So, but there's also the tensegrity model of the cell and biomechanical transduction, and this is super important. Because the old model of the cell is called the balloon model of the cell. Here there's kind of a sac with a bunch of goo in it, and it doesn't really have, it doesn't even show any kind of skeleton in here, right? Where the tensegrity model of the cell refers to the cytoskeleton and its effects. And there's about a 30-year study at Harvard Medical School that goes into quite a bit of detail on this, but the cytoskeleton of the cell maintains its shape, and where there's three parts: the microfilaments, microtubules, and intermediate filaments. And where they anchor in, there's certain enzymes and different things that when they are compressed or moved, they respond and they produce biochemical effects based upon the tension and compression of the cell. So here's a Buckminster Fuller who developed tensegrity, developed the geodesic dome, and it's super strong because you just push one place and the tension is distributed over the entire structure. Okay, and here's a photomicrograph showing all the cytoskeleton of the cell, and it's amazing. There's so much there, but yet it's been pretty much ignored in what it does until just recently. And so the reason this is important is because vibroacoustic disease is caused by excessive exposure to low frequency and infrasound. And what happens there is that airplane pilots, not all, some, not all, but people who work on the tarmac, people who work with heavy equipment or in noisy factories, their cells are being bombarded by all these low frequency sounds, and so the cell responds, emits different biochemical markers that say, hey, we need more connective tissue to try and protect, and it produces connective tissue around all the internal organs, and excessively, and sometimes it's not very good. It's not something you want to happen to you. And so wearing ear protection around prolonged low frequencies is just like wearing sunglasses when working with x-rays. It protects the sense organs, but not the cells in the body. And so I wonder if the excessive low frequency noise disrupts the cellular structure of the water, and the body produces excessive connective tissue in an attempt to protect the structured water in the cells. I think it's a reasonable hypothesis. We'll see how that plays out. So, to summarize, hearing can profoundly affect our conscious state. The quality of sound can trigger right brain activation and parasympathetic response, which leads to healing. The chakra areas appear to be stimulated by sound of varying frequencies. Hair and tactile receptors transmit information that can stimulate a parasympathetic response. Modulations of the magnetic field of the heart might imprint blood with new information. Sound can induce mechanical changes at the cellular level and affect connective tissue. The connective tissue can act as a biocrystalline superconducting network, instantaneously connecting every part of the body. So when the sounds come in from the gong are very coherent, those sounds can be in one part of the body, but the information from that is instantaneously transmitted to every cell. 99% of the molecules in our body are water molecules, and all that water is structured. And water can store information in that structure, and this impacts the expression of our DNA. Modulating the water molecules with sound can restore them to their natural state, and this can activate the innate healing wisdom of the body. And one more thing. This is my most speculative theory. It is baryonic acoustic oscillations. And this is a picture of a bunch of galaxies. Well, as we said, gongs are non-linear percussive instruments. And if we can go back a little ways before all those galaxies, I'm not saying there was a Big Bang. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. But if there was, the people who believe there was have done a lot of math. And, the sound of a gong, it's a nonlinear instrument, can be described in mathematical detail in a set of nonlinear coupled differential equations that govern the dynamics of the oscillating equations, whereas the coefficients are directly connected to the geometry and elastic properties of the vibrating object. That's the gong. But these are the exact same properties, are the description of what governs the baryonic acoustic oscillations. And baryonic acoustic oscillations are 400,000 years after the Big Bang. Sound waves, uh, matter separated from light, and it created a pattern of galaxies in the cosmos, and this is a reflection of the sound produced from that baryonic acoustic oscillation. So here's a map of that sound, some microwave background radiation, or is it a sonogram of the birth of the universe when light and matter separated? Well, it makes me wonder, was the sound of matter and light letting go of each other the same as the sound of a gong? Does this sound cause us to let go of our thoughts and return to the feeling of the true nature of our being in the cosmos? Well, maybe Don was right after all. Maybe the universe is a gong. And everything is a fractal vibration reverberating from this baryonic acoustic oscillation. And I wonder
I
if
got a
the
question.
yeah.
Who played the gong?
Yeah. So we are the gong because we are uh, we are fractal holographic representations of that sound. We are the gong. We are the fractal harmonics of it. And so I wonder, is the alter state created by the gong actually our natural state, connecting us with the oneness of everything? And most people, the most common experience when people stand behind the gong is, I was out in space. I was in the cosmos. I was out and it's a sense of deep inner peace at the same time. So that's my show. I want to invite people to come down and see me. I'm in San Diego County. Uh, it's pretty darn fun. And I'm teaching a few workshops this year. If you'd like to attend one of my workshops, I think all the information is there at Globe. And this is a little bit about what we're doing. So there you go.
So, what would your experience be as to how all of this affects emotions?
Well, the parasympathetic response is probably the answer to that.
Hmm. Go ahead and
So,
stop sharing your screen there.
oh, okay, sure. Uh, I can find my. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay, great. Thanks.
Cool.
Um, Parasympathetic response is is kind of where all the emotions come from, right? That when your body's relaxed, you can heal. You go into a healing state. This is a feeling. Everything is a feeling. Um, all of your nervous system is just sensing all different kind of vibrations, and then you just make up something in your head and call it real, and we say, well, I have a feeling about that. And it's an internal representation. We can't know the external world. It's impossible. It's impossible to know the external world. All we can know is that we sense all these vibrations, and then we create an internal representation of what we believe is happening outside of us. Pretty much we're wrong about everything. Oh, I forgot to mention that disclaimer when I started. Don't believe anything I say. Not all.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah,
right. Maybe it's not.
yeah, yeah. No, it's good pontification. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so the whole deal is peace. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the parasympathetic. When you get to a place of peace, and even Jeffrey Thompson talked about it in his presentation. When you get a place of peace, then everything starts resolving, right?
exactly.
Because the way I think of it is all the emotions are chaotic vibrations doing their thing instead of stable, consistent, which is a gong also.
Right.
Even though it's chaotic, it's stable, consistent. It's not going right. It's not
Yeah.
jumping around. And so that stable consistency is the definition of peace.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that. You know, that's the one thing that people experience here is lasting deep inner peace.
Yeah.
And
It's
people
int-
are stressed out sometimes.
it's
And
interesting because gongs, it's almost a conundrum because gongs are so activating, and we
yeah,
think of them as activating to break people, to break things up, right? And to provide, more frequencies than the mind can handle, so it goes into theta. But people fall asleep to it all
right,
the time, right? And I was
right.
thinking, what's going on? Well, it's stable, consistent, right? It's not jumping around,
It's
right?
not
And it
linear.
creates a build up and a breakdown of a flow,
Right,
is when you played right.
right. Well, that's why I had those pictures of the blue screen in there because it's a reset. It's, one of the things in Buddhism is about emptiness. And emptiness doesn't mean the nihilist philosophy of, of nothing. It means empty cognizance. It means being fully aware, but yet free of all thoughts, concepts, and ideas. And this is what the gong does. You just turn off your phone. It works a little better when you turn it back on. Same kind of thing. Turn off your mind. It really works better when you turn it back on. And the longer you can leave it off, the better it works when you turn it back on. And honestly, the favorite part of my sessions is at the end when we're done.
Right.
And they're sitting here in the room, and I'm sitting here, and we're in total silence. Nobody wants to talk about anything. We ain't got nothing to say, nothing to do. I could stay there all day. It is
Right.
the most
Right.
beautiful experience of empty cognizance. And so you can practice Buddhist meditation for 40 years, or I don't know, come stand behind my gong.
Yeah. I think there's nothing better in the entire field of sound healing than when you get to that still point at the end of silence and
Yeah.
don't do anything for like 15 minutes, or even an hour. Or if you hold it, you can hold it through the night, right? Don't talk to anybody. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Okay, so I forgot to ask you in your treatment session, what were those different instruments? You had some unusual instruments.
So I had a wind whistle I kind of started with, which
Uh-huh.
this is a little clay thing that's made. And then there's these stones from India. It's a piece of granite that is sliced like a loaf of bread, but it's not sliced all the way through. And I worked with a team of engineers and stuff, and we created the instrument that I call the cosmic transducer. And that's kind of the drum that it sits on. And these are okay, that's a rock that weighs 150 pounds. And so this is a highly engineered instrument. You can see another one in the corner weighs 550 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't play that one, but because it takes a little while to get it going. But I kind of like the smaller one better, honestly. But you get your hands wet and you rub it on there, and every stone is different. And of course, we did a lot of treatment on these stones. I had them cryogenically frozen down to minus 323 degrees Fahrenheit, and over a weekend, and then brought back. And I have some pretty cool videos of some of the work we did with them.
What does
And
freezing do to them?
so, do you know about cryogenically freezing horns and stuff?
Not
Like,
horns, just people.
oh yeah,
Oh,
just
that's all
people.
I know. That's all I know.
Yeah. So, um, trumpet players and trombone players and stuff, brass instruments will freeze their instruments because it tightens up at the atomic level and gets out tiny little bubbles of air or whatever is in there. And I didn't have it for my presentation because it wasn't about that, but I have a spectral analysis before and after, so you can see the changes in the sound from
Wow.
different treatments we did. Now I did another treatment after that where I used a Tesla coil like that girl with the hair. It was a Tesla coil like that, and I put 800,000 volts through each of the lamellas of the stone, and that actually helped quite a bit. Anyway,
Cool. Cool. So, you know, I remember from your last presentation quite a few years ago that you do with the crystals. You do a clearing of the crystals in the very beginning,
Yeah.
and then somehow you imprint the intention for the conference for the treatment into the crystals, right? With your
So
intention.
it is really interesting. And, you know, I'm sorry I can't take my computer into that room to show you all the stuff because it's shielded.
Yeah.
And,
Uh-huh.
on the telephone, and I'll just walk across the threshold, even with the door open, it cuts off right away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But all the bowls are there's a table with crystals with articulating arms that are the Vogel crystals, and these are crystals that are tuned to the water molecule, and lights flash behind those crystals, and then bowls are laid on the person and around the person in precisely measured sacred geometry, and then I have all different kinds of crystals that are programmed for whatever that person needs, and they're put in the bowls on their body and around their body. And it's pretty cool. I
How do you
mean,
program them, the
okay, well,
crystals?
how you program that's there's a protocol I can send it to you,
Uh-huh.
right? But basically, it is um, using the magnetic field of your heart and your intention. If I was going to do one here, so I would take a crystal and I would hold it over my heart. I would cross my legs, right?
Uh-huh.
And I would feel the crystal, feel the is it the personality, is the nature, is the essence? Just feel what it is. Bring that feeling from your arm up into your heart of your left hand. Now put it into your right hand. Now, what do you want it to do? Crystals, they're like Labrador retrievers. They just want to do what you want to do. So,
Or goldies.
yeah, or golden retrievers. Okay, very, but um, so So now, what do I want it to do? And so I'll tell you a story. For example, I had a friend long ago, back when I was in the Navy band. I played guitar in the Navy band like 40 years ago. And there's a woman who had gone into the hospital because she had had a baby and she couldn't stop bleeding. And they thought she was going to die. Now, her husband thought that I was a freaking nut. And she thought I was a genius. The debate still rages. In any case, um, I did this process, and I like brought the crystal, bring it into my heart, hold it. Now, what do I want it to do? I'm going to tell it, okay, let's just straighten everything out for her. Let's create a field around her where it can just think and just heal themselves. And I put that intention into my heart, and then take a breath, exhale quickly through my nose, pulsing my breath and moving my hand through the magnetic field of my heart, and this stores the information in the crystal. Anyway, the next morning, her husband called me up. He goes, I don't know what you did, but thank you. And
Hmm.
so that was a lot coming from him. I had something similar where I came home late at night after a gig. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock. And I walk into my kitchen and there's a trail of ants going up onto the counter, up into the cabinet. And on the top of that cabinet, there's like a 5 pound bag of sugar with ants. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired, been playing all night. Like, I just grabbed the crystal, programmed it for the ants to go away, sit on the counter, went to bed. Got up the next morning, all the ants were gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
So you first feel the energy from your arm and just feel the energy, and then you put it in the left hand and then the right hand over your heart, and then you've got that intention in your mind to say it, and it is right,
yeah.
and then you do like a whoop like this
So
across the heart.
it's like hitting a hammer, hitting a nail with a
Uh-huh.
hammer.
Uh-huh.
So you're moving it through the heart, and at the same time you're pulsing your breath through your nose
Oh, right.
like that, because that causes this other electrical discharge.
Okay.
And this is something I learned from Marcel 30, 40 years ago. And
Wow.
I've adapted it since then, including the magnetic field of your heart. It amplifies the power
Uh-huh.
of the program. And
Very cool. Oh my God, you could totally, if you have any emotion going on, you could totally transform that in a second with that. I
oh,
mean,
I'll tell
because
you what,
emotions are the easiest to well, not always, not always, unless they're really deep.
people are laying on the table, and I'll say, okay, so I'm just going to put this crystal right up here above your head. Which way feels better, this way or that way? And they go, oh yeah, the first way. I'm like, okay, now I know if when you got here I told you you're going to be able to tell me which way a rock is facing 12 inches above your head, you think I was nut, but you can feel it. And often before I even start the session, I'm just getting things laid out for the person. They will just drift off and go, oh my
Hmm.
God, it feels so amazing.
Hmm.
So,
Wow. Wow. It's really interesting. It's a kind of proof as to how chaotic the electromagnetic fields are around us all the time and how much they affect us. And by simply clearing out, having a room that doesn't allow any other electromagnetism in and have very specific energies
yes,
set in that room. I
yes,
mean,
yes.
this is the way every living room, every house should be. I mean, from now on.
Well, at least every bedroom. At least every bedroom. So that when you sleep, you are free from that external uh, input constantly bombarding you. Yeah, it's a big help.
Wow.
I don't think I have one in here, but I use a bulk tape eraser to erase the
Hmm.
crystals. After every session, after everything, they get erased.
Wow.
And so when I first moved into this room, um, my friend is erasing all the bowls while I'm getting things arranged, and he's erasing all my Tibetan bowls. And the door was open, and his phone is sitting there by the door. So it was his girlfriend called. He picked up the phone. As soon as he answered the phone, the tape eraser exploded in his hand
Whoa.
because the phone is bouncing all around inside the room. He can't get out, and
Mm.
so so no phones in the room.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't let
Wow.
anybody. I make sure. I mean, you can come in, and if you want to take pictures, just turn everything on airplane, right?
Uh-huh.
It's pretty
Wow.
cool, man. Yeah, man, come
Wow.
down.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
fun.
I really like to check it out.
Yeah.
Sounds incredible what you've done, all the different pieces you've pulled together, and you're still on the path, and that's just really
Oh,
beautiful.
but man, it's just getting better every day. And
We
you
are
know,
so blessed, aren't we?
yeah. I just want to say one. I just want to plug my friend Marshall Leifert's book here, called Cosmometry. It is the unified model of cosmic geometry, physics, music, and consciousness. And anyone who's watching this program will enjoy this book because I'm going to show you. It is filled with cool
Huh.
pictures. And how do you have a picture of music or a picture of consciousness? Well, it all fits together, and he's done an amazing job. When I saw him, I said, Marshall, thank you for writing this book. So now I didn't have to write it.
Cool, cool. Well, really interesting, really intriguing, and thank you so much for your work. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. And next year, I'll be able to present the results of my study.
hmm.
So in the study, there's three phases. Somebody stands behind the big gong, and then somebody stands with headphones on and listens to the sound, but you don't play it because
Hmm.
we want to demonstrate the difference in response of physiological response on your salivary biomarkers between listening to something and between feeling the vibrations.
Hmm. Hmm.
Second phase is somebody stands behind the gong, somebody lays down in a zero gravity chair in front of the gong because 20 minutes, people sometimes will go, oh my God, it was so hard to stand up. So I got a little chair for them to sit on. They go, I don't know, man, just to balance in that chair is too much.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
I do like the vibrations going like right into your body. So
Nice.
we'll see which posture makes. And then the third phase is whichever one of those is most effective. Then we're going to do a study 10 sessions over 5 weeks, come in twice a week, and see what the long term effects are.
Hmm. Cool, cool. Excellent.
Anyway,
Excellent.
David, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
All
I'm
right.
going to play the closing video now. Thanks.
All right.